Mercy Me is coming to Pittsburgh, the Together Again tour with Mercy Me, Crowder, and special guest Andrew Ripp, Thursday, October 5th. Bring your family and friends to the PPG Paints Arena in Pittsburgh for Mercy Me, Crowder, and Andrew Ripp live in concert. 3 multiple award-winning artists on one stage for one night. Let your spirit soar, your heart sing, and your faith ignite. Mark your calendars for Thursday, October 5th. Get your tickets now at mercyme.org.
It's one of those things that's really difficult to understand, much less talk about.
We are created as emotional and spiritual creatures, created to do one thing in life, is live fully. But we can't do it unless we live fully in relationship. We don't live in a relational world anymore.
Everyone, and welcome to the Christy Wright Show. I'm so excited because today we are talking about feelings. You know I love talking about this. I have lots of feelings. I have so many feelings. My feelings have feelings. Like, this is going to be a really fun episode. And then I get to sit down with the brilliant and amazing author Chip Dodd. He has an incredible book called Voice of the Heart, among other books. And we're going to talk about the appropriate role that feelings have in our lives. But first, let's go ahead and kick this off and talk about our feelings. Well, I'm going to tell you a story, an example of this. So I guess it was 10 years ago, my now husband and I were dating at the time. So we weren't married. And in fact, it was probably like pretty early into our relationship where we were coming up on the holidays and it was going to be our first Christmas together. Y'all, I was so excited. I had not had a boyfriend at the holidays in like years. And Christmas is my favorite holiday. It's so romantic and hot chocolate. And you look at Christmas lights and you give each other presents. Like, I had just been anticipating this for the last couple months. I could not wait to spend Christmas with my new boyfriend, Matt. Well, as Christmas got closer and my dreams just got bigger and my expectations got higher, at some point we had the conversation where I realized he didn't have the same dreams. Yeah, he planned to spend Christmas with his family. Rude. Okay, y'all, it was amazing how that kickstarted this whole conversation that I never saw coming. My feelings were so hurt. I was so disappointed. I hadn't had a boyfriend in years. It's my favorite holiday. All I wanted to do was spend this holiday with my boyfriend. We were serious. I thought I was important to him. I thought he loved me. What happened? Well, we started having some conversations. We went back and forth talking about Christmas and scheduling and his family traditions and when they do certain things and certain meals and what my family does and why does he have to go home to Alabama and can't we make it work here? And we're just operating at the surface of talking about schedules, talking about how we could possibly make it work and how it won't work if he's going to go home to Alabama at Christmas. And then I realized in that conversation, we were talking about the wrong thing. We were talking about Christmas, the holiday, and that wasn't actually the problem. We were talking about schedules, and that wasn't the problem. We were talking about driving distances and him going home to Alabama where he's from, and that wasn't the problem. We just kept operating at the surface, talking about problems that weren't the real problem. And then I said something in the context of our conversation that finally opened up my realization of what was really going on in me. And I said, I feel like because you don't want to spend Christmas with me, I'm not important to you. Immediately, I had realized what was really going on. Immediately, I put words and language to the feelings I had been feeling. Immediately, I got us to the root problem of what was going on. And what's so beautiful about that conversation and how amazing my now husband is he was able to speak to that right at the core. He said, you're so important to me. He said, in fact, you're so important to me. This is probably my last Christmas I'll spend with my family because you are my priority. I can see us planning Christmases for the rest of our life together. But this Christmas, when we're dating, I'm going to spend it with my family. But please know, it's not because you're not important. It's actually the exact opposite. I want to have a good Christmas at home, just like old times, like when I was a kid, with my family, with my sister, my mom and my dad, and do all of our traditions because it may be the last time we do it like that. Whew. My heart felt so relieved. I felt so seen. I felt so heard. And my feelings He met me there. He met me at the core of my feelings. But you know, so many people miss this. They just operate at the surface. They have fights at the surface. They have conflict and communication at the surface level. They're negotiating schedules and who did what and why you did it. But what's so interesting is that's often not the problem. The problem is there's a root and deeper layers of what's going on in you, what's going on in the other person. What feelings are you feeling? What's driving your behavior? What's driving the things that you're saying? And if you can get to that deeper layer, if you can get to the root of what's going on, you can solve it there. You can find healing there. You can have amazing communication there. You can find intimacy and connection with the other person there at the deepest level, at the root of what's going on. So I want to give you a really simple question that you can ask yourself to get to the root. Are you ready for it? It's so easy. When you ask yourself this question, you're going to get into one layer below and then the next layer below. You're peeling away the layers like an onion to get to the core of what's going on in any conflict or any situation. Here's the question. Why? Why? This is actually a really effective coaching technique where coaches will ask the client why. The client responds and the coach says again, why? And the client responds to that why, and then they say why. You just keep asking why. It's a little redundant. You sound a little like a broken record, but you know what? It works. You just keep asking why. So let's use an example. You say, I'm overwhelmed. And I say, why? And you say, because I have too many things going on. Well, why? Well, because I involve myself in all these different commitments and I take on a lot of responsibilities. Why? Because I want people to think I'm a good mom. All right, we're getting somewhere now. When you ask why again and again and again, you get to your deepest feelings, you get to your deepest motivations, and you're not only gaining self-awareness about yourself, but you're opening yourself up to find healing and connection where it actually counts. So ask yourself why. When you're trying to get in touch with your feelings, when you're trying to get in touch with, why am I so mad about that? Why did I have that crazy response to that person? Why did that person make me feel like that? Ask yourself why. Why? Why do I feel angry and short-tempered right now? Why? Why? It's gonna bring you to the core of what's going on in you. It's an effective coaching technique, but it's also a really great tool and question you can ask yourself for self-awareness for you, but also to build closer relationships with every single person around you. All right, y'all, I'm so excited to get to sit down with the author of the amazing book, Voice of the Heart, Dr. Chip Dodd. Thanks for being here.
I'm glad to be here, Christy. Thank you.
This is the book that everybody knows. People talk about this book.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
I heard about you for years before I got to really meet you or even hear you speak and learn about the Voice of the Heart. But let's just start with this, and then I want to talk about your new book. Tell us what this is about. What is this?
This book, and you know, there are so many different stories about telling what it's about,
Yeah.
but the simplest way to put it, after I wrote it, it grew into the recognition of what I'd done.
Okay.
And what's amazing is this book is very quietly, it's all over the world.
It is? It's
yeah,
crazy.
It's like Laos and Spain and Argentina and Murfreesboro.
Yeah, yeah.
And but what the book is about, in its simplest form, is it's an ancient story, and I'm reintroducing the solution to the problem. And going all the way back to the Garden of Eden, when the deceiver comes into the garden and says, "Are you so sure that this God is really who he says he is?"
Yeah.
And instead of crying out, instead of using how God had made them to speak up, they hid out. And then when God comes back into the garden to greet them, his question is Aika, which is, where are you? In Hebrew, it's a lament. It's a parental lament. I've lost you. You've separated from me. I can see your face. I can see your body. I know where you're standing, but I don't know your heart. And what was amazing was in that lament, I know God's omniscient, of course, but God's also relational. And in that lament, God is asking the man, he said, where are you? And Adam said, I was afraid, so I hid. And the whole universe cracked when we hid out instead of crying out. And so what's amazing is that over time, this is our problem. This is the ancient problem that continues today. God continues to say, where are you? And we have to decide between hiding out or crying out.
Yeah.
Now, the voice of the heart this is what I believe describes the 8 core feelings that God has given us to allow us to live in a tragic place. Between the first 2 books of the Bible, Genesis, Edenic, the last 2 books were home, glory. It's a story of struggle and living between grief and celebration.
Yeah.
So this book's about the 8 feelings God's given us to live fully in a tragic place.
So this is so interesting because when you use that example, you spoke for Devo a few weeks ago, and you talked about this question of where are you? You know, anytime I'd read that, I thought like geographically, like where are you? Like instead of like
hiding behind that bush.
Right, that tree over there. I never knew it meant like and that really struck a chord with me because I thought, you know, even in my conversations with my husband, I've never said it that way, of course, but that's what I'm getting at. I'm like, what's going on? Are you okay? Are we okay? Or you know, people have asked me that question in different ways. And so I think it's one of those things, feelings, and I love how you describe it. It's one of those things that's really difficult to understand, much less talk about. So why is this something you wanted to tackle? Why did you want to write about this?
Well, I tell you what, because of the one is that when I was reawakened to how I'm created, it just struck me, and I became compelled to not be able to stop thinking about it.
When did that happen for you? What do you mean by that?
Like late 80s. Okay. I had lived basically a tough guy, willpower, intellect, moral injunction, moral performance is the way to success. Okay. And I was leaving behind love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. The heart word is emphasized in Scripture more than mind, even soul and spirit. And I didn't know what heart was. Yeah. So I sort of got reintroduced to how we're created. And then everything started just like dominoes for me. Everything just awakened. And I realized that we are created. Now, neuroscience has backed this up now, 20-something years later after my, awakening.
Right.
But we are created as emotional and spiritual creatures, created to do one thing in life, and it's live fully. But we can't do it unless we live fully in relationship, head with heart connected, and I can talk about that a lot. And then relationship with others and God.
Yeah.
And then we create out of that fulfillment. Now, neuroscience has clearly pointed out now that we human beings, we literally come out of the womb looking for who's looking for us. We're literally wired for connection. Wow. And that connection is the ability to be emotionally vulnerable to develop emotional resilience. So, and a lot of people talk about the book from the standpoint of, how come there are 7 negative feelings? If you look at the list, fear, sad, hurt,
I'm an optimist. I'm gonna admit, when I read over them, Chip, I was like, I don't like 7 of these. I don't like this at all.
Exactly. It's like, I don't like them either. In fact, I only like one of them myself. But every feeling is a tool. It's not just the feeling for the sake of feelings. It's feeling for the sake of identification. What am I feeling? Okay. Exploration. Where is it coming from? What's familiar? What's happened? We're taking ownership of our hearts, our lives. The book says, guard your heart with all diligence, for it's the wellspring of life. And neuroscience has shown us you're created to use your brain to articulate your heart. Wow. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is the man, right? So neuroscience has actually finally confirmed what we as Christians have known since the oldest story in Genesis.
Yeah. That's
that
fascinating.
We're created for relationship.
Okay, so let me ask you this. What do you think, as you've been doing research, studying this, writing about this, and meeting with people, speaking all over the world, what do you think we get wrong? Like, what do you think we misunderstand about feelings? Or what are we just not getting?
Yeah, that's a great question. One is we automatically interpret them as negative. And they're primary colors. Okay. And so if you don't know the primary colors, you really can't be a painting artist. You have to know, what is it, red, blue, and yellow. Right. And mixing, matching. So the feelings don't restrict us. They actually, if we learn them, they expand us. That's number one. Good. And number 2 is we think that feelings are moral. Now, feelings are like the organs of the body. You breathe with your lungs. Are they bad? Are they good? Well, your lungs are good. They're made to function. Function. So feelings are functions. What you do with them can be the evil, the sin, the mistakes. And our sickness, even depression and anxiety and addiction, all of those problems predominantly come from what we do to hide our feelings. They're suppressing our feelings using willpower instead of willing ourselves to speak what's true within us. Wow. We're made for connection. And so when we suppress how we're created, we wind up losing, how we're made, what we're made to do, and the full life.
Okay, so this is interesting. I'm just thinking, even as you're talking, when you say like expressing what is true, one of the things that I'll struggle with, and this is me just, being vulnerable here of this whole idea of feelings, is I don't know how to trust my feelings. It's like, which feelings are valid and right, and which one are me just going off the crazy train? Because Chip, I can just my feelings, I got so many feelings, my feelings have feelings. Like, I don't know what's right and what's crazy,
and we live in a great era. We have an extraordinary opportunity where we live in these days, and yet we're having a great negative experience with it. But identify what you're feeling, and there are only 8 feelings. So, and they're good. They're tools we've been given to be able to live fully in a tragic place. Life to the full is being able to live between 1 and 10. Grief, all the way to celebration and everything in between. When you lose contact with your feelings, your life's between 5 and 5. And what's amazing too, as an offshoot, people who are attracted to the Ramsey solution, they're coming to this with fear. My life's not going like I want it to. Often hurt because their plans have been diminished, their hopes are wounded. They're sick and tired, and they're willing to eat beans and rice. And even was one of Dave's things. So, but that's an anger. I'm willing to do whatever it takes is an emotional experience. And so they come here willing to do whatever it takes. They're identifying their feelings, whether they know it or not. They're exploring, what do I need to do to resolve this, where this feeling's taking me to? And then who do I tell? So identify, explore, and express. It's very, very important. But the difference, what you asked, what's the difference between a reaction and a response? And we live in a time in which we're seeing so many people, they think they're expressing feelings, but what they're really doing, they're saying, I have a feeling you've got a problem. I have a feeling you've got something to fix. Instead of, I have a feeling, how can you help me? I have a feeling, will you assist me? I have a feeling, will you teach me
that
something?
Connection piece.
And honest expression. And so many times people end up having feelings, and there are only 8 feelings, primary colors. So and this is going to sound a little drastic, but unless you're speaking one of these 8, you're probably not located in the truth of what you're really feeling.
Wow.
So, that's a bit drastic at first, but primary colors, a certain number of musical notes, a certain number of organs in the body. What's the big shock? That we only have 8 core feelings.
Okay, so when you are in this, when you're feeling something strongly, let's say it's one of those tense situations. Let's just talk about this morning, Chip. Let's just talk about me getting out of the house this morning. Let's make this real. No, I'm serious. I have had a headache for 3 days. My kids are screaming. I have 3 kids under age 6. Everybody's screaming. And I was short with my husband. And I felt so bad. I'm not mad at him. He's not done a single thing wrong. And I apologized later. I said, I'm so sorry. But I couldn't have sorted through my feelings in that moment for the life of me. Everyone's screaming. My head has been throbbing for 2 days. I'm trying to get us out the door to school. How do you help people in those heightened situations get to one of the primary colors here? Because I don't know that I could have. I don't know. I still can't.
Very often, it usually happens afterwards, like you just experienced. But the beauty of you is that you were able to recognize how you had misused how God made you. And you looked into his face and you recognized that you had hurt who you loved. I mean, I'm sure you saw it on his face a little bit.
Oh, yeah. He looked at me like, are you hearing how you were talking to me? His face said it all.
He fired a torpedo back at your ship.
No, he didn't.
But what you recognized was through your sensitivity. You looked at him through the eyes of your heart. And so when things are bigger than the events, we know that we're being overwhelmed. We've got to stop. So like when you're on fire, stop, drop, and roll. You've got to stop. Otherwise, what happens is you try to take control to stop your feelings instead of being able to process and use your feelings. For example, more than likely, when you get under tough pressure, because we're all 99.9% the same. So, you and I are like everyone else here is too. But you're probably into fear. In some ways or another, your life's getting like, this is out of control. Where are my kids going? Chaos, COVID, you've got your work, he's got his. And so it's scary. So instead of being able to let your fear take you to asking for help, which takes you to getting help, hope, taking risk of hope, what happens is the fear becomes anxiousness. And then anxiousness becomes like, I've got to get a hold of this. You see how my... and it's like, I got to get control.
I feel like this is me all day, every day.
And then people around you who are sensing that they're picking up on all this control coming, they're going like, oh, watch out, be careful, Mama's here. Kind of thing. And I know that's a bit big, but what happens is then finally we snap. We snap out at somebody. We insult someone. We see ourselves as the only one doing it, And so fear is there in us to allow us to ask for help. But if we can't do fear, what happens is we become anxious and we start trying to control our environments, and that finally puts us in a position of being isolated, or rageful, or irritable, restless, discontent.
Yeah, and it's so hard in the moment, like you said, to discern what's going on and what's at the root.
When it's bigger than the event, then you know that you're really not in a good place. You don't have time to identify, explore, express.
Yeah.
The best we can do is just kind of go, I've got nothing.
Yeah.
Right now, don't talk to me.
Yeah.
I'll come back to it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And
stop
what
it in
you
the
did so beautifully is you went back to it.
Yeah.
You came back around and went, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And everything was reconnected. And that's what's amazing, that when we're able to tell the truth about the heart, take ownership, responsibility, the other person, and it's neuroscience, but the other person limbically picks up on you being safe and you caring.
Wow.
So it's called limbic resonance and attunement. It's what a parent has with a child. They acknowledge the child, they attend to the child, then they attune, which they're picking up on each other. And what's amazing is that with parents and young children, that attunement literally feeds the child's brain, heart, body, skin, breathing, and they develop a sense of security, social connection, and social contentment. And when you do something like as simple as, hey, look, I'm sorry I said that, and you're not even practicing, I felt fear, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You're actually using your feelings to benefit. His love for you automatically is re-instilled. You're attuned.
Wow.
And he goes, hey, it's okay. I understand. You know, it's hard right now.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it's like you're both secure. And it's like you're bouncing off to work.
Okay,
like you're back in that, just being super positive.
Yeah. That's so good. Okay. I have
It's
a question.
real, too.
Yes.
I mean, it's real.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Okay, so I have a question for you. And literally, this is the question I've been wanting to ask you since I knew this interview was happening. I'm like so excited to ask it. This is my number one, I guess, struggle when it comes to feelings. What is the balance between feeling your feelings, honoring your feelings, living from the heart,
Yes.
and not using them as a crutch
Yes.
to just be an excuse? Well, I just feel mad, so I'm going to act mad. Well, I just am not feeling whatever. Where
That is
people,
great.
and I see, it seems like it's one extreme or the other. We don't have feelings at all, and that's not good. We suppress them. Or we're acting out of them so much that they're just driving this car off a cliff. So help me understand this, because I really struggle
the
here.
right to be abusive is
Yeah,
what a lot of
yeah.
times people would do with feelings. And people who do that, they're refusing to take ownership of their feelings. And we think of that as feelings. Like a person who is hurt, if they don't take ownership, I feel hurt, I need help, I need healing, okay? That's ownership.
Yeah.
If they don't do that, we know that hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
And they hurt people through resentment. If you can't take ownership of the truth of what's happening, then an impaired feeling takes its place. Hurt becomes resentment, anger becomes pride and depression, fear becomes anxiety, and all these impairments end up being an attack on others.
Wow.
So scared people who won't take ownership of their fear scare people.
Wow.
Hurt people who won't take ownership of their hurt people through resentment. And lonely people who won't take ownership of their need for relationship become apathetic. They distance themselves from their own neediness. And they end up being people who leave others lonely because they won't show up.
Yeah.
So if you take ownership of the feelings, God has created us through willingness, taking ownership that I have a feeling, and therefore with that feeling comes a need. And with that need comes a need to speak, talk, reach, act, ponder, like with the Devo.
Yeah.
And so willingness is the heart being fully participating. Patience means keeping hope. And then by giving your hands, your head, and your heart to something, you're all in. It's called courage. Full-hearted participation is courage, strength.
Yeah.
And then by just simply telling the truth, God has promised us to receive the benefits of our feelings. The Psalms are full of what happens when we tell the truth about our hearts, and it always leads to results, sometimes delayed, sometimes immediate. But it's always about developing intimacy, living fully, grief being resolved, celebration being committed. It's about living fully, and it happens when we go to others and God and tell the truth about what's happening inside of us.
I love how you talk about, too, that it's rooted in a need, that we have a need. And that's so vulnerable, which is probably why I and many people struggle with it, because vulnerability is not not fun.
The world teaches us that that's the problem. The vulnerability is the problem.
Yeah, but I think it's so interesting because one of the things you just said is the exact opposite of what I was thinking. I was thinking that like when you live from your feelings, you're just kind of, letting your feelings drive the car, and it's almost a message it's a lack of personal responsibility.
Yes.
You're saying it's the exact opposite. Owning your feelings is personal responsibility. It's your responsibility.
100%. And I love that you're bringing this up because we know we don't need to return to sort of the World War II stoicism. That would be the worst mistake because there are a lot of negative results from that. But the problem is we think we're having feelings, but we're not. We're having reactions.
That's good. Talk to us about the difference there. How do we know what the difference is? We
literally live in a world right now that's incapable of tolerating neediness and vulnerability. We don't live in a relational world anymore. We don't live in, I'm created to be effectively dependent and God is the source of my creation. And I need others to be able to live fully in terms of true intimacy. So we live in a culture now that literally says, like I said earlier, if I have a feeling, I'm disrupted. If I have a feeling, it's a problem. So we're very intolerant of feelings. Now, if I have a feeling, we literally look outside of us and we say, you got to fix it. I've got a feeling, you've got a problem. I've got a feeling, I've got pain, you've got to stop it.
Or I've got a feeling, no, I don't. Like I'm just going to talk myself out of it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like we're trying to get rid of it regardless.
Yes,
yeah.
I've got a feeling something's wrong with me.
Right.
We're either ashamed of having feelings or we're shameless in our rejection of them. We make other people pay. The real, fully alive human being is a response-able creature. They know that they're created to live fully in relationship and it can't happen alone. We're admitting that we are created as emotional and spiritual creatures created to live fully. And we're made to use our brains to express our hearts and live in relationship and then go do what we're made to do with others involved. And so ultimate responsibility is taking ownership of what's happening inside of us. As a person thinks in their heart, so is he. And God in 2 Samuel 16, talking about David, says that man looks at appearances, invulnerabilities, what the strengths are in performance, but God looks at the heart.
Wow.
Always asking from the book of Genesis to the point where we're sitting right now, and you answered that question even this morning. God says, where are you? I want to know you. I want to be with you.
Yeah.
I literally created you to live fully, and you can't do it without me, and you can't do it without people around you. So you literally, you know it. And so you took the risk of being emotionally vulnerable this morning. I hope it's not too personal.
No, it's
but
good.
You took the risk of being emotionally vulnerable this morning. You admitted, I am human. I have love. I have needs. I have desire. I have longings. I have hope. And they're with you.
Yeah.
And so, I'm sorry because I know what it's like to be human. And I just said something kind of rough to another human being who happens to be the love of my life, right?
Yeah.
So, it's just amazing how you took responsibility instead of where you were. I've got a feeling somebody's going to have a problem.
Right. It's too loud. It's number 1, 2, and 3. It's you 3 right there. The problem.
Like George Bailey, That's Wonderful Life. Why do we have to have all these kids?
Oh, no. Where'd they come from?
But by the way, that's a great example. Almost all of us are familiar with the movie It's a Wonderful Life. And watch the movie again and notice that when George picks up the newel on top of the staircase post, he picks it up and when he is about to destroy his life, he picks it up and wants to throw it. He's overwhelmed. When he wakes back up to how he's created, who he's made to be, he's made to be, he sees his life, he winds up on the bridge and he says, I want to live again. I want to live again. He literally is being who God made him to be. When he gets back home, the same newel comes off the staircase, and this time he kisses it because I'm created to live fully in relationship with myself, others, and God. And I don't care what happens to me. I'm going to jail. That's fine. But love has conquered the fear that would make us do anything we can do to avoid vulnerability.
Yeah.
We're created for vulnerability, and through vulnerability, we wind up living fully in relationship, and that takes us to emotional resilience. Which we keep heart no matter what happens.
That's so good. I love that. I love that movie. It's one of my favorite Christmas movies, but I love that example. I'd never thought of it through that lens, but that's such a beautiful lens of the perspective of how that changes. Jake Smith, Jake Smith.
Great guy.
So he did a thing with us, the Ramsey personalities here, and he was kind of walking us through the 4 quadrants. And I was familiar with the 8 feelings, but the way that he unpacked, what most of us gravitate towards one of the other quadrants. And it was very clear for me that I gravitated towards the head, or strength, whichever one it was. But I remember thinking, when they were talking about you neglect one or you neglect the other ones. And I felt the most gentle whisper in that room. It's all of us Ramsey personalities, brand leaders, some leaders, whatever, as we're working through this. And I felt the most gentle whisper from the Lord. And he said, you don't just neglect your heart, you fight it. And it was like this visual of literally this visceral, and it comes from childhood wounds of being vulnerable and being hurt. And so it's like, I have learned to just muscle your way through life. And so it's like, that's what's so powerful to hear how you flip it on its head of, it's not a lack of personal responsibility. It's actually the ultimate responsibility. It's not a lack of resilience. It is actually the true resilience.
Yes, you're no longer running from how you're created.
Yeah.
And I can really relate to you. I mean, willpower, like, you're not going to get to me. This is a challenge. I'll overcome it, and I won't even show you that it hurts.
Yeah. And the world rewards that.
Pays much for it. But then what happens is, it's amazing, is if you're willing to be paid for it, then there's somebody out there that will pay you to destroy yourself and benefit from all the...
And you watch celebrities do it all the time.
Left and right.
Yeah.
And the work addiction, for example, it's like this guy this woman will give her life to activity in the name of somehow benefiting her family. And then she gets old and she's on her deathbed. She doesn't say, I wish I'd spent more time at the office, if she has anything going on inside of her. When she's buried, the people who would have loved her and the people she was made to love, they go to her graveside, but they don't weep for who they missed. They weep for who they never knew. So their tears are tragic versus the greatest tears of all. They get to weep and miss who they have deep memories of, collective memories of, or I remember this when she this, and we went there, and I remember she told me this. They remember these experiences of relationship, where we were emotionally awake.
This is one of the things I love that you talk about in your book, and I think it's in the chapter on sadness, the feeling on sadness, of you think of sadness as bad, like you said, but sadness, you say, it shows you how much you love and value something else. Like, wow, like I never thought of sadness that way.
That's great. Sadness is a feeling that allows us to honor loss because life is full of loss. Fear is a feeling that allows us to cry out for help because we see ourselves as in danger.
Yeah.
Hurt is a feeling that allows us to know we're in pain, we have a wound, and we need help and healing. Loneliness is a feeling that tells us we're made for relationship with ourselves, others, and God. We're created for intimacy. That's the gift. And even sadness has the gift of acceptance, which makes us stronger. Healthy shame brings humility. Healthy shame says we're dependent and we're made to be in relationship with each other. Guilt brings us to forgiveness. So these feelings aren't bad. They're good.
Yeah.
Anger even allows us to say, I want this so much. I'm willing to hunger and thirst beans and rice.
Yes.
The people who really succeed with Ramsey Solutions and all the programs you guys have, they're doing it through anger.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's how
you can channel anger. People are like, I'm like, I'm passionate. I'm not angry. I'm passionate.
Yeah. Well, and passion is the gift of what anger could bring us to, which is a willingness to be in pain for something that matters more than pain.
Yeah.
And I know at first it sounds complex, but this is extraordinarily commonsensical.
Yeah.
With 3 primary colors, you can paint the world 10,000 tones. Like there are 52 shades of green in Ireland, but it still starts out with primary colors.
Yeah.
The musical notes, we haven't finished the symphonies. So the feelings aren't restricted, but if you don't know them, the truth is you can't really ever become fully responsible. You can't ever become really free to live in a relationship. You're always on some level going to be guarded because you don't have the courage of being willing to be yourself as God made you.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. It's just amazing how everything in your writing is so, it is common sense, but it's like, it's so countercultural and no one thinks about it this way. And so it's like, you have to spend some time here. Like you have to spend some time reading and even reflecting in yourself of like, what's going on in me? Like you could read it again and again and still get something new out of it. Chip, I could talk to you about this forever, but you have a new book and I want to make sure
by the way, I want to say, if we don't have to, cutting in here again,
it's good.
But it's our responsibility to answer God's question. He hungers to know us from the inside out.
That's so good.
And so it's kind of our responsibility. It's not a weakness, it's our strength.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. I know people will want to connect to this. This is Voice of the Heart. You have a new book, though, and I want to hit on this before we have to wrap up. Hope in the Age of Addiction. This is the brand new one. Tell us about what made you want to write about that.
To quickly summarize this book, that it's almost like these are bookends. I wrote this book first, and then Stephen James and I wrote Hope in the Age of Addiction. I've worked in the addiction field for 30 years. So it's almost like these bookends, and there are 6 books between that I've done. And addiction, we live in a highly addicted culture, and guess what? Addiction is an attempt to have a full life as God created us without having to pay the price of feelings.
Wow.
So
that's
addiction,
good.
addiction is a feeling disorder.
Wow.
The things we do to avoid having to feel.
That is so good. Oh,
Yeah.
that right there. I'm like, oh, I can't wait to read it.
It's a really good book, and I'm glad I wrote it, but it really won't make as much sense unless we come back to
Start
the
with
voice
the
of the
feeling.
heart.
It's so good. You know, it's funny. Like I said, I'd heard about your writing and teaching well before I even got to know you. But just this morning, true story, aside from my meltdown at home, after that, I was on a Zoom call.
You're just being human.
Oh my gosh. I was on a Zoom call with all the parents of kindergartners from my son's school, where it's all this introductory information, whatever. And one of the, administrators that's doing a presentation, one of the teachers, they were recommending some books, and one was Parenting from the Heart.
Oh, yeah.
That is from you. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm interviewing him today. I was just so excited. But your work is it just goes to show there's a ripple effect that is so far beyond anything you could possibly imagine. So just thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your writing. Thank you for your heart.
Thank you for what you're doing, your honesty, your vulnerability, and your resilience, because Ramsey Solutions is actually bringing real solutions to the problems of our society, calling people out of isolation into the life, into light. So it's great. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I know people want to know where they can find you and get your books before we wrap up.
ChipDodd.com is my website, and then Amazon, everywhere.
Where the books are sold. Awesome. Well, thank you again. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Christy.
All right, y'all, I would love to share a verse with you, and this is actually the shortest verse in the Bible. Are you ready for it? This is John 11:35. Jesus wept. Let me give you a little backstory here so it makes some kind of sense and has some context around it. So Lazarus has died, and now we see what is happening where Mary is so devastated. It says, when Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. Verse 35, Jesus wept. I don't know about you, but there's something about that verse that is so moving to consider that Jesus had feelings, that Jesus wasn't just perfect and happy and everything was effortless and easy for him, that he wasn't a robot, he wasn't an emotional iceberg. He had feelings, highs and lows, emotions and pulls. It says here, just before that verse, it says he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. And then he wept. I want to share that with you, depending on where you are today, as an encouragement that you're not alone. I love how the Bible reminds us that Jesus felt what we feel. He experienced all of the temptations we experience, but without sin, that he was completely human and at the same time completely God. So I've got some journal questions for you as you process your own emotions, your own feelings right where you are. The first one is this. How does it feel to consider that Jesus had emotions, that he also had feelings just like you? Write down your answer. Your second question is this. What emotions are you feeling right now? Don't overthink it. Don't analyze it. Don't criticize it. Don't edit it. Don't filter it. Just write down what you're feeling and be completely honest. No one's going to see this but you. What are you feeling right now? Write down your answer. Now, your third question is actually a series of questions. We've been talking about this, but I want you to do the exercise I've been talking about where you ask yourself why. So in question number 2, you wrote down what you're feeling, the emotions that you're experiencing right now. Question number 3, why? Why do you feel that way? And after you write down that answer, ask again, why? Why do you feel that? And then after you write down that answer, you continue to ask yourself why until you get to the deepest root layer of what's going on in you. We're not going to operate at the surface. We're going to get to the core and the heart of what you're feeling and what's going on with you right now. Write down your answer. All right, I would love to wrap up and I would love to pray for you and pray that God will meet you right where you are in your truest feelings. Let's pray. God, thank you that you created us as emotional and spiritual beings, that our emotions have a place in our life. And sometimes we're overwhelmed by them. Sometimes we feel a victim to them. And sometimes we just don't know what to do with them. But God, thank you that you can handle every emotion we have, that we can come to you in confidence. We can bring our feelings, our thoughts, our fears, every emotion we have to you. And we can find healing and love and acceptance right where we need it. God, you know what we need better than we do. You know exactly how to meet our needs. You know exactly how to fill the holes in us. You know how to cure the problems we have and solve those in our life. God, I pray for every single person watching and listening right now that you would meet him or her right where they are, that you would help them feel a sense of confidence in their emotions and acceptance in their emotions, and that you would give them exactly what they need right where they are. Thank you that you love us. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you so much for watching, and you can join us next week for another new episode of The Christy Wright Show. And of course, as always, for more encouragement on building confidence in yourself and the God that created you, you can visit ChristyWright.com.
Mercy Me is coming to Pittsburgh, the Together Again tour with Mercy Me, Crowder, and special guest Andrew Rip, Thursday, October 5th. Bring your family and friends to the PPG Paints Arena in Pittsburgh for Mercy Me, Crowder, and Andrew Rip live in concert. 3 multiple award-winning artists on one stage for one night. Let your spirit soar, your heart sing, and your faith ignite. Mark your calendars for Thursday, October 5th. Get your tickets now at mercyme.org.